Oh, hello.
Hello. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you as well. My name is Jason. What's yours?
My name is Hiroshi. I'm
Ah,
I'm calling from Japan.
very nice to meet you, Hiroshi. Very
Oh,
nice to meet you. I
what?
am I am from Canada.
Oh, from
Um,
here. Okay.
Canada, but I actually live in the Philippines now. I
Oh,
live in the Philippines.
really?
Yeah.
I see. How many years ago did you come to live in the Philippines?
I've been here for almost a year now. I'm a retired engineer, and I had been working in the Philippines, and I met my wife there, who's a Filipina from the
Oh,
Philippines.
mhm.
So I married her, and
Oh,
then because of COVID, I decided to retire, and then
mhm.
I moved to the Philippines, and we would normally be going back and forth, but of course, COVID makes such things difficult. It's difficult to
Right.
travel.
Mhm.
So I'm here at the moment, and I quite like it.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
but I've been to the Philippines before that. I was multiple times because
Mhm.
I married my wife here.
Actually, I've been to the Philippines a couple of times, and I traveled in the Philippines.
Hmm.
Uh, about how many years ago? Probably more than 5 years ago, I traveled in the Philippines, and I don't remember the names, but I traveled quite a lot of places.
Wow, that's very nice. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
there's quite a large number of Japanese people here in the Philippines, businessmen
Oh,
and just tourists, but also businessmen. There's quite a few people do business here in
mm,
the Philippines. So, um, Philippines they like other cultures, and Japan is one of those cultures that they are very interested in. So, um,
mm.
yeah.
Well, what part of the Philippines do you live now?
I live in on the island of Bohol, which is in the
Oh,
central part, which is called Visayas. That's the central part, the central islands, and we're right beside the big city, which is Cebu. Cebu is the
okay.
big city.
Yeah, Cebu is a very famous, yeah, trade.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I like it much better than Manila. Manila has just become too big. It's
Yeah.
too big. It's a bit dirty and
Mhm.
those kind of things. So I live in the countryside. I live in Bohol.
Yeah.
So
Well, I remember now that to tell the truth, I visited the Philippines only a couple of years ago, before the corona began.
hmm.
I went to Baguio. Do you know Baguio?
Baguio, I do. I've never been, but I know about it. Yes,
Yeah, it's a very cool place. It's a
it's
mountainous
it's
place.
very high.
Yeah, very, yeah. You know, now in Japan, it's very hot in summer.
Hmm.
So I escaped the heat of Japan and I went to the summer resort in the Philippines.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I attended the English school there
Hmm.
and I studied English with the young people.
Hmm.
Yeah, that English school was run by Korean, so there are many Korean students there.
Hmm.
But yeah, they are very good, you know. Some of the young people are very kind to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I enjoyed staying there.
It is a very friendly country. They are very friendly people. If you treat them with respect, they'll give you nothing but friendship and smiles back. They're very caring people. Family is what they care about more than anything. I mean, it is not a rich country, but they get things right and they take care of each other and they take care of their family, and I admire that, and I love about my wife, and she's
I
um,
think sorry. I think the Philippines is now developing economically, I mean.
mhm.
Uh, I think their lives are very improving, I think.
No, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I mean, all of Asia is growing so much. So, I mean, the Philippines, of course, is with it, but it is. There are some unique challenges to the Philippines that I think a couple other countries don't have as much. Corruption is a massive problem here.
Mm,
It is, and it does stifle economic activity. But on the
yeah.
plus side of things, the people here have like a hunger for their children to do better. They will sacrifice everything and anything for their children to have a better life. So education is a huge issue and of huge import here. And also they work, like they will work and work and work and work. So a very good work ethic. So the country is going to get better economically. Every year, for sure.
So, how do you like the President
Duterte? Well, I have to be.
He's to retire very soon, I think.
Yeah, he's up for, there's an election coming soon, and he's technically not allowed to run again because of their constitution. There's rules in the Philippines. You're actually not allowed to say anything. And I try to stay away from when people talk politics to me. Some foreigners do get involved, and I just think you have to be careful. Like now, I have my opinions on Duterte. I will tell you that, okay, here's Duterte in a nutshell. There was massive issues with drugs. The Philippines was starting to get inundated with drugs. Shabu shabu, which is a form of meth, amphetamine, was starting to become everywhere in the country. China, there's plants in China that are pumping that stuff out by the ton. Most of it's going to the United States, but some of it's going to, because it's so cheap. And so drugs were starting to become a problem. And when you got an area with poverty and you introduce drugs, a lot of people just say, you know what, I don't like my life, I'm going to forget about it. And they either drink or they do drugs. So there was an element of that. Duterte came in and he said, I'm going to take care of that. And he did. But now we get into the rub. Did he respect everybody's civil rights? Did he do everything 100% properly? No, not even close. However, the Filipino people love Duterte because he did clean up the crime. He did. And they will always love him for that. No. And so
people also, he seems to be very strong man to control drugs.
And that's his main thing. Now, me as a foreigner, he does have a bit of a blind spot towards China. Duterte has a personal reason why he hates the United States. Like, he hates the United States. A long time ago, Duterte had an American girlfriend, and this was in the 1960s. He was a young man, and they would not let him in. The American government, this is before he was involved in any kind of politics. They did not let him in. And he's borne a grudge for America ever since. And so he's got a bit of a blind spot. Like, he hates America, which is fine.
You're private problem, isn't it?
Yeah, but it does lead to some weird weird situations here, because China's being incredibly aggressive to the Philippines. I mean, we talked about the economy, but it's also not very strong militarily. And so, I mean, very, very, very brave people, but they just don't have the money to buy sophisticated hardware that you would need to do, like something like Japan or the United States does. And so China is basically, everybody knows, anybody that turns on the news knows exactly what they're doing in the South China Sea. You probably know what the 8-dash line is. Like, China claims the whole thing, all the way down to Indonesia, which is just preposterous. It's just preposterous. And so Duterte does this thing sometimes where he's like, well, I know China's doing this, but they're not so bad. And that's the one thing where even my wife, who likes Duterte, he says, yeah, he shouldn't be doing this. Because China's actually doing this, like actually taking their land, actually like literally pushing inland. And it is sort of an invasion in slow motion. And the strongest thing that this country has as far as a defense policy is that they have a mutual defense clause with the United States, which, of course, because this used to be an American protectorate. So if in theory, if the Chinese ever decide to blow something up here, they're in a lot of trouble, because then the Americans, by treaty, are obligated to respond in kind. And then the world will change overnight. And we know that if the United States and China finally do get into a shooting war, and unfortunately China would Japan would be drawn in, Taiwan, Korea, like it'll get very ugly very quickly. So we don't want these things. But Duterte does these things to constantly antagonize the Americans. Like, he's talking about getting the what do they call it? There's an agreement. It's called the Mutual Forces Agreement. And what it is that the Americans will not put their troops on your soil unless they get an understanding that they cannot be held legally liable for anything that they do. Because the idea is that they're sending military forces, and sometimes bad things happen, and it's true. And so they don't want to be held to account. It's actually something most governments do. But Duterte is saying, I'm going to pull that. Well, the Americans said, well, if you do that, we're going to pull all our forces out of the Philippines. Not that there are big forces here, but they do help the insurgencies. Because believe it or not, Mick, I know this sounds crazy. There are still communist insurgents in this country, like straight up communist insurgents, which it blows my mind that that's still something that has to be dealt with. There also is a Muslim independence media group down here. So there are terrorist issues. And so the Americans do have special forces down here helping them, but it's a very small number. But what I'm saying is sort of, like Duterte kind of is like playing a game, like, well, the Americans don't want to leave or whatever. And if the Americans ever nullified that self-defense policy, I mean, the mutual defense policy, the Philippines would lose a lot of, bargaining power with China. Yeah. And so I question that. But on the other side of it, I mean, the people love him, and it's very hard for me as a foreigner to question that. I mean, the Philippines, they run their lives, they govern they decide what they want. The one thing that a lot of people here don't care about is a lot of countries have imposed sanctions against Duterte personally, and members of his parliament, because they feel that they've committed crimes like not respecting human rights. Because there's been many allegations of just flat out shooting people that were not, you weren't 100% sure if they were drug dealers, but the policy came down. I mean, it's disputed, it's under dispute, it hasn't been proven, beyond a reasonable doubt. But the orders basically came down as like, these are the guys that we're pretty sure are drug dealers, just kill them. And because there was a stretch from 2016 to 2018, literally like thousands of people died, and they were all suspected drug dealers. Now, is that the way to deal with the drug problem? Who knows? I will say this: the drug problem in the Philippines literally almost disappeared in 2 years because of those people dying. Now, however, are there some innocents in there? Now, you just knowing the law of statistics, there had to be some innocent people. And so, but the Filipinos, the people that vote for him, they don't care about that as much, because there was a bad problem and now it's much better. And listen, when a politician actually does what he promises, he's going to have support, because what do politicians normally do? They do the opposite of what they promise. And so then, they never do that. So there's a lot of love for him here. And I will never be the one that speaks against him.
So I think that China is helping the Philippines with a lot of money.
They are, yes, they are. Yeah.
So that's why the president, don't criticize so much about the.
Probably. I mean, there might be an element of that. But at that point, if somebody's giving you a lot of money but also trying to take your land, it almost looks like it's a bit of a bribe at that point. But I understand that. I mean, the world, politics is very complicated, and I'm just some foreigner living here and trying to live his life, and that's kind of why I tend to stay away from these things. But it is becoming dangerous here, and not for personal safety, but just what's happening in the South China Sea. I mean, there's a lot of military hardware here, and sooner or later something bad is going to happen, I think, sadly. And then a lot of people the world will change overnight. Like if it goes to a shooting war between China and the United States, as people are starting to predict, if not this year, next year, 2 years, 5 years, a lot of people are going to die, and it's not going to be good. A lot of everybody.
Yeah, we are very worried about.
I agree. I worry about that actually daily. I don't want anything like that at all.
Okay. Thank you very much for nice talking, and very informative. You told me a lot of things I didn't know.
Well, when COVID ends, please return to the Philippines. It's a wonderful country, and they would gladly love to have you here.
Okay. Thank you.